Welcome to Hermit Woods, where there's a story in every bottle.
What's happening?
We are live.
We are live.
We're live.
Cheers.
It's another Monday.
Oh, this
And
is
a
a
very
good
special
drink.
one. Look at these cute little glasses.
Mine's almost empty.
How'd that happen?
No. It's a little glass.
To another Monday. Hello,
Another
folks.
Monday.
Cheers,
Welcome.
everybody.
You have something out there to cheers with us.
Happy birthday, Bob.
Happy
Cheers.
Third quarter.
There's always something to celebrate. But yes, it was Bob's birthday last week, but we were interviewing the wonderful folks from Mo Cheese, so we didn't celebrate Bob's birthday. So figured this
Well, the
week.
longer the birthday lasts, the better.
Exactly.
I know you get to just drag it out, do this, do that.
We're running out of birthdays as you get older, right? So you gotta really have this question.
Yeah, just spread out the celebration.
It should be a month long.
We've been eating your birthday cake all week.
Oh, good. Yes.
His birthday cake?
My mother bought me a birthday cake.
A very large birthday
Yeah.
cake for a.
There were 6 people, which couldn't eat cake. So I was not going to take the cake home. That would have been very bad. So I told her to drop it off at the winery. I'm sure somebody would want.
That's nice.
So welcome to another Monday night. We're excited to be here. We have some really fun stuff to talk about. We've touched on this subject a little bit in the past, but we're going to sort of condense it down into one concise conversation about just bubbles. Bubbles that where they come from, how we came to drink bubbled wine, and sort of the history of it, and then what some of the world experiences with bubbled wine, and then we'll talk about how we express our various bubbled wines. And we're going to finish it. Right there, and on Facebook there's a little bell. If you subscribe to our Facebook or YouTube channel, then you will be notified every time we go live, which is at the very least every Monday at 5:30. But we also are known to go live from completely random places and completely random times. Ice skating on the bay, skiing on the slopes of Benstock, or floating in a boat somewhere in Maine. Yeah. So who knows where we'll be
We're gonna be
next?
floating
We're on a
again soon.
racetrack.
Yeah, we went on a racetrack. That was fun.
Yeah, we're going to be going live from a sailboat in September.
Yeah.
So you should better subscribe if you want to learn about that. And if you are joining us, please let us know you're here. Put your name in the comments so we know that you're here. If you have any questions while you're watching, just add them to the comments, and either Marika will respond to the questions right away, or she will bring them to the group, and we'll talk about it on the air. And lastly, if you like what we're doing here, please like the broadcast and share it with your friends and family if you think they would be interested in seeing what we have to talk about as well. That way we can broaden our audience and spread the word. So with that being said, let's talk about bubbles. So I did some research, as I like to do.
Because did you happen to find out when the first carbonated beverage?
I did.
You did?
Well, there's a lot of debate about it.
Because I know there's some naturally carbonated waters that occur geologically on the planet.
Really?
Well,
I
And that
didn't know
may have
that.
been like the first expression. That's just my thoughts on it, where people actually said, oh, this is interesting. Here's water that's bubbly. and tastes a little different. And maybe that's where the idea came from. Because I don't know how
It actually, it's believed that and you can imagine this, it was purely by accident.
a home brewer put a cap on a
Home
bottle.
brewer or not, the early days, nobody understood anything about fermentation.
Yeah.
And anybody who has fermented for the first time has probably had the experience of having blown a cap or a cork.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really believed that sometime pre the 16th century or during the 1600s that somebody started, or not somebody, probably a lot of people were experiencing this problem and not sure what to do about it, not sure how to handle it. And in fact, in the very early days, and I found this to be a very interesting fact, Dom Pérignon, who's accredited in some cases with being the founder of Champagne, which is really false. He is not, but a lot of people think of him as really the founder of sparkling beverages. And he was around in the 17th century, and his job for the monastery that he worked for was to try and prevent bubbles. Bubbles were a flaw when he first started working with it.
Okay.
So you can imagine that, if they discovered it accidentally,
They're trying to make a still
they didn't
wine.
want it because they wanted that still wine. Yeah. So in the early days, what I read is there's a couple things that are really of interest. There was a monastery in Languedoc, long before Champagne, that was known for making sparkling beverage. They had that mistake happen and they capitalized on it. They liked it.
Well, was this
So-
like a pet nat where they were
Yes.
they were fermenting something and they thought it was done. They put it into a bottle. There were still sugars, there were still yeast, and then a month or a year later, they took a bottle out of their cellar, pulled the cork out. The cork popped out. It foamed a little bit.
It is, yeah,
And then they, they drank it, something like that.
That's certainly how it probably was discovered. But they talked about this group discovering the concept that if you didn't allow it to finish fermenting before you put it in the bottle, then it turns out bubbly.
Yeah.
And they appreciated it and tried to make it happen. They didn't have a lot of control over it because they didn't know the process. But they embraced it and they made it public and they tried to sell it to the people in their world, and they enjoyed it. While Dom Pérignon was trying to get rid of bubbles. And
It's just all about marketing, deciding, no, this is a good thing. We want this.
Right.
You want this.
Yes.
You know you want
Yes.
this wonderful new thing.
And then the other interesting fact was a lot of the French shipped a lot of wine to England, and wine would show up in England bubbly because they didn't always finish it. It didn't always finish the ferment because they would be fermenting into the colder months, and as it warmed up and was
Yeast
shipped
got going
across,
again.
shipped across the channel, the British were discovering sparkling wines, and they were loving it. And the royalty were
And the
really
French were going, no, we sent you a flat wine.
well. They had
What are
Dom
you talking
Pérignon
about?
back there trying to work his butt off to keep this stuff from bubbling, while the British royalty are like, "Wait a minute,
No, we
this is
like
pretty good. Send us more." So that was another interesting fact. It was really there's a lot of credit given to why champagnes were popularized because the British royalty helped popularize it. And then another interesting fact, I've shared this on the show before, but the cellar crews that had to work with sparkling beverages in the early days had to wear iron masks
This stuff was blowing up.
because their bottles did not support the pressure. And if you had a stack of bottles and one blew,
Did
yeah.
you're going to have boom, boom, boom. They're going to ricochet, and glass is flying everywhere. So that you have to really protect their. This is another reason they sent Dom Pérignon down there to stop the bubbles because they were probably killing people,
They're killing people.
taking
and
people's
losing
eyes
wine.
out. So it was interesting. So the French made glass with wood-fired furnaces. The British discovered coal-fired furnaces, which
So they could
burn
get
a lot hotter. So the British were actually credited with coming up with an appropriate glass that could actually support
A high pressure.
the pressure
glass.
champagne.
Borosilicate or something that's stronger.
Yeah. So even though the French began to accept sparkling wine, they struggled with it for years. They were losing, they said somewhere between 20 and 80% of their crop each year to explosions in the cellar. God knows how many winemaker assistants they lost.
They lost it.
in the process.
Right.
So the British discovered the glass, and then and it wasn't long. It was in the mid 1700s that the French really adopted.
So the French are trying to get rid of these bubbles. They're shipping some of the stuff away that they thought was fine. It's going to England. The England are loving these little bubbles. At the same time, the British are figuring out how to make stronger glass and saying, hey, you Frenchmen, if you've got problems with your bottles blown up, use our glass. So they've started commerce that way, back and forth, do you think?
Well, yes, the French discovered the glass and ended up either learning how to make it themselves the way the British did, or importing the glass over. Because it was around this time that the world changed for sparkling wine, and the region of Champagne began to adopt it. I mean, obviously, if the British royals want it, they need a product.
Well, see, now that's another interesting part, because the geography comes into play here too, because Languedoc or Bordeaux is a warmer climate, and they're making wines that have lower acid levels and are richer, fuller, higher alcohol. And those lend themselves to becoming still wines. And that's what we think of. We think of a nice, dry Bordeaux.
Right.
Whereas if you're in a cooler climate up in Champagne, you're struggling to get these grapes to come full ripeness, to have full sugar. They have a lot of acid. And you end up with this fairly thin, racy, acid-rich wine that's really not that pleasing to drink still. But if you chill it down and put bubbles in it, it becomes a whole nother wonderful thing. So the combination comes into play there. So you need both. That liquid has that right chemical balance to take those bubbles and run with it.
So generally,
if you had a carbonated Cabernet, it probably wouldn't be good.
I've had them. They're not that good. There are people trying it. It's not as interesting at all. So I would then assume most sparkling beverages are made from colder climate grapes. Yeah. Not cold climate, but cooler climate. Usually Germany. Yeah. And the other interesting thing, and I didn't have enough time to dig hard into this, but it wasn't just the British and the French in the game. Prosecco came around also. The Italians were thinking about this stuff also very early on.
Good.
And although the Italians really became known for the Charmet method, they learned how to ferment and bubble in a tank. Yeah. And it wasn't long after that period that the Spanish cava, that's the French, the Spanish sparkling wines are known as cava. So it was throughout this region around the 1700s, through mid to late 1700s, that sparkling beverages both became popularized and the technology came around to actually be able to make them and support them in bottle.
Here again, the Prosecco area north of Venice, Treviso, that region is the northern Italy, close to the Italian Alps.
Cooler climate, higher elevations.
So they're growing grapes that have higher acid and lend themselves to bubbles. Whereas further south, where they're growing Nebbiolo and Sangiovese and making dry red wines, Chiantis and things, don't lend themselves to bubbles. So it's that geographic play as well.
There was another interesting comment too. Evidently the British are the ones who rediscovered cork. So the Romans figured out cork
for a while, then cork went away, and then
the Romans figured out cork, and then in the Dark Ages, cork went away. A lot of bad things happened in the Dark Ages, I guess. But around the 1600s or 1700s, the British are the ones who are credited with bringing cork back into the stoppage business, and the French obviously adopting it soon after. Yeah. And again, I don't know how that reflects around, when you think about the entire European continent, wine was being made in every country. And so how these things were learned and were distributed amongst various countries and producers. I don't know. There's probably a dissertation to be done on all of those details.
There already have been a few.
Yes. And in preparing for this show, I didn't have the time to write the dissertation. So,
No?
No. But it was fascinating to dig in as I did and learn a little bit about it. So probably the next thing we should talk about is, now we know a little bit about the origins of sparkling beverages. Let's talk about the various ways in which one achieves that result.
I think you
because
should,
there's a
you
lot.
should just take a break and sip some
I was
more
gonna
wine.
say,
because
yeah.
We're empty over here while you're talking.
Which is
Wow.
really
And
unfair.
we're ready to go
yeah.
for another one. And maybe the audience is catching up now and might have some comments or
Wait.
Yeah,
questions.
we've got a few.
Okay,
So we,
before
we
you
do
do
want
that-
to show
have.
this too.
Oh, yeah.
I
what
switch
was
to
going.
that camera there
Sure.
and look at this.
Higher, higher,
It's
higher.
going on the
There.
keyboard.
And there
Gonna
it
drop
is.
on the keyboard.
Oh no. Anyway,
So thank you, Travis.
some wonderful
Some snacks.
munchies from our deli.
You know,
Always
they
a
really
joy.
go nicely with this. This is a sparkling rosé that we started with, and we have a few sparkling wines, and we've had a series of different sparkling wines at Hermit Woods over the years.
Before you go on though, let me just make a comment on the fact that you said this goes
yeah.
well with the sparkling
Yeah.
wine. The one thing that, if you don't know this already, and a lot of people are worried about food and wine pairing, if you're ever stumped and you just don't know what to pair with something,
Yeah, if you're going to someone's house,
Champagne.
yeah, bring champagne.
champagne is
Bring it,
going
yeah.
to pair better with almost everything than
Yeah.
anything else. So it's just a good tip. Go. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to tune in and say, yeah, we've got, of course, our usual followers. Priscilla's joined us. Christina's on. Matt and Lynn are here. Gary's
Excellent,
here.
guys. Hi, everybody.
Marianne has joined us. Janice has joined us. All the usual folks. It was fun. Yeah, we've seen a lot of them in the past week or so. We did some rosehip picking with several people a little over a week ago. And
Yep.
then Christine and her husband were up
Mm-hmm.
for the week last week and stopped in a couple times. Matt and Lynn were in this weekend for their anniversary. We've been
Yeah.
seeing lots of friendly faces this past week, so it's nice to see
Matt's
everyone.
got a new project.
I saw the
I
picture.
saw that.
Steampunk bicycle.
Steampunk.
builder 2.
Yes, I love it. I can't wait to see that. I can't wait to ride with you, Matt, with that new rig. Hope it doesn't take too long. So what are we going to talk about? What are we going to put? My glass is empty.
Wow. See, we're just helping out here.
I just poured another splash of the rosé, but I don't know if we want to open something different.
I think that's where Ken was going with this.
Well, that's what I was going to switch up. But what was your favorite of the rosé pairings? This
Not the pickle.
spicy, not the spicy salami didn't go well. The pickle and olive was too much. I did like the that's the chili
Oh, yeah, that's hot
yeah.
pepper. Yep.
jelly on top of the brie.
I think it's brie, or maybe the Willoughby. I think
And-
that's the Willoughby. I think
Okay.
a little more potent than brie.
Anyway, that's a really nice combo with the rosé.
Mhm.
The dried sausage was good. The peach, I'm staying away from peaches right now.
The peanut butter.
The peanut butter went really well on bread. If it had some jelly, maybe it would just.
Well, maybe with the balsamic fig.
Oh yeah, that could be
Oh,
good.
you could try that. Yeah.
So before you go on, if anybody did not say, we're drinking this sparkling rosé out of a can,
Instead of the
which
bottle.
is the same product that is in the bottle, just packaged for those who want to entertain themselves on boats or in places where carrying heavy glass is either dangerous or
Hiking.
not ideal. So we're drinking out of a can today, but both of these are the same. This is crafted from cranberries from Cape Cod, apples from Apple Hill Farm in Concord, both a sweet cider blend and a Kingston Black whole cider apple crushed and floated in the ferment for
Yes.
some tannins from the
Yeah.
skin and the like. So
Yeah.
what are we drinking next?
I think we should go for the crab apple.
I think so too. I like this sound.
Yeah.
It's going to get better though.
It is going to get better.
We'll
because
talk
we
about
have-
that in a minute.
We have different technologies. So there are different ways to create bubbles in wines. And as Dom struggled back in the 1600s to get rid of them, he was trying to understand what's creating these bubbles. And
Why
these
don't you-
bubbles are created by the process of fermentation. When yeast are eating up sugars, their byproduct is CO2.
So there's
And
nothing you can
during
do.
fermentation, that CO2 needs to go somewhere, it needs to off gas. And if you put something that's still actively fermenting in a bottle and seal it, that
No
gas
place
is
for that
just
gas
going
to
to
go.
keep getting stronger and stronger.
And there's nothing this is a natural process.
a natural process.
There's no way to avoid it.
Well, there
You
are
can't make
ways
alcohol without producing CO2.
Well, no, you can.
You can?
Yes. Yeah, we create a lot of ethanol straight from hydrocarbons.
Oh.
But
You don't want to drink that.
all the ethanol that we consume is made through fermentation.
I don't think you can
chemically-
consume any of those ethanols from hydrocarbons, can you?
Yeah, I
Safely?
mean, it's ethanol. It's ethanol. It is just that chemical structure. That's it. It's fine, but
I didn't know that.
it's not allowed to be sold that way. But it's created and used, added to fuel, done all sorts of things. But anyway, there's a real resurgence, I think, in sort of old style of creating bubbles, the petulance naturale. So probably about the same time, 14, 15, 1600s, the French were experimenting with this, and the way they did it
Well,
was
that's what they were doing in Languedoc.
while it was fermenting, they would grab that liquid and put it into a container that didn't have a way for it to get out. And if they did it right, the bottle wouldn't explode, and they would end up with a nice bubbly liquid. Although they had to send some poor person down there with a full garment on to protect them to see which ones are going to go or not.
Must have been scary approaching the pile of wines.
But nowadays, for most people, myself included, just 10 years ago, when I thought of champagne, I thought of just champagne. There's one type of thing, it's called champagne. I didn't really know how it was made. I do now from studying it, but that was the only way I really thought about it. But this whole pet nat idea is really interesting, and a lot of people are enjoying those. They're a new thing. Even the sort of the younger generation is enjoying these more rustic, original ways of making bubbles. In the pet nat style, you're taking this active ferment near its end point and then putting that into a bottle and sealing. When you make champagne in the traditional way, you let it ferment all the way until it's dry. And that means that all of the sugars have been consumed, turned into alcohol. Well, if there's no sugar, how do you create the bubbles? So what they do is they add a very specific amount of sugar to the liquid and put it into a bottle. They've figured out how much sugar to add so that they create as much pressure as possible without popping the bottle. So it's a much more controlled format. The wine then goes through that secondary fermentation in a bottle, and then the yeast die after consuming those sugars, and the liquid stays on the dead yeast. And the dead yeast decays, and it creates a different mouthfeel. And in champagne, in cava, they have minimum requirements of sitting on the leaves, on that dead yeast for at least a year or 3 years, or for the Grand Cru 5 years in champagne. And it creates a much different mouthfeel, a much more finessed character to the wine. The Charmat method is like you mentioned in Prosecco, is a way of generating fairly high pressures with CO2, but not using yeast to do it. You take compressed carbon dioxide gas
We'll do both.
and bubble it through. They also will do it with the full tank champagne or the yeast and sugar.
I thought,
You do both. You can do both.
yeah, I thought Charmat meant that it was yeast fermented in the tank. That's how Prosecco's made.
I don't know that they're all made that way. That's a good question. What happened? Did you get bit by something?
Oh, no wonder.
Oh, you got a wasp on you. You did get bit.
Well, it did. That's weird.
They're all over the place right now because of
It actually
there's a
sting?
lack of nectar out there.
Mhm.
So there's lots of them. There's a bunch of them out back. I had to, some that when I go through all the peaches to make wine, there's some that are rotten or whatever, and those go out to the dumpster. So the dumpster right now is
A wasp nest.
a wasp haven. Yeah. No, I brought in some Benadryl so we could.
Yeah,
Just in case, yeah.
We have some downstairs.
I don't need it. It'll go away.
Anyway, so the Charmat could be made with the sugar addition and the yeast in a big tank instead of each individual bottle, or it can be a forced carbonate format.
Right. Yeah, I know it's a Charmat tank that you force carbonate in,
Yeah.
but I'm just curious about,
Original.
as I read, the Prosecco was made by carbonating in the tank through yeast, but
I would think if you're
Again, it's probably a
carbonating-
big topic.
You get
could parse.
better bubbles from the yeast
Yeah.
I would
than you
think
do in the tank.
if you're carbonating in the tank and then bottling, I would feel like you would lose a lot of the bubble, just the process of getting it from tank to bottle. Just
It's bottled
sending
under
it
pressure.
That's a great question, Marika, and it's a really important one to understand. Just like we do here, when you bottle a still wine, you don't have to worry about that. But when you're bottling something carbonated, you do want to worry about that. If you try to pour Coca-Cola out of a jug into a bottle,
Right.
it foams all over the place,
Yeah,
and you
just
lose
and
all
going,
of the
just going
carbonation.
through the tubes and getting,
So what they have is a device called a counter pressure bottle filler. So the whole system is pressurized. You put an empty bottle into the chamber and then pressurize it to the same level that the wine is at. And then the wine won't move into that bottle unless you bleed off just a little tiny bit of pressure. And as soon as you reduce the pressure just a tiny bit, then the liquid flows. So let's say it's 15 psi over here and it's 14.9 psi over here. The liquid makes its way into the bottle and fills without losing all of its pressure. And it's also done when the liquid is very cold, because if you have a cold liquid, like a cold Coca-Cola, you can pour in a glass. A warm one out, you left it in the trunk of the car and you go and you open it,
it's much worse.
so the solubility of CO2 goes up as the temperature goes down.
At what point is CO2 100% soluble in liquid? At what temperature? Do you know?
What do you mean by
At
that?
what temperature do you have to drop the liquid to so that CO2 no longer attempts to leave the liquid or needs to leave or tries to leave the liquid? Is there a temperature before freezing?
Oh, and it's always just a balance of the environment. So there's pressure and temperature that are coming into play between those two.
Right.
So you can't just do temperature alone. I mean, even CO2 itself will become a liquid
Right.
or a solid.
No, I know. So I'm wondering if there is a place along the scale where if you've got the liquid temperature down low enough that you wouldn't have to worry about CO2 escaping at all. But you probably couldn't, because if you got down that low, you'd probably be freezing your wine, because wine would freeze at
Well, the way
11 degrees or something.
Yeah,
like
so
that.
there are these very precise tables that brewers use for carbonating their beer, and cider makers that carbonate their cider and wines. And it's the temperature and the pressure of the gas that come into equilibrium. And you decide how much you want to have. And they call it, volumes of CO2
Right.
that are in your liquid. And a typical beer might be 2 volumes of CO2. So there's a lot of CO2 that's pushed into that. But a champagne might have 5 volumes or 2 volumes of CO2. So it's much, and that's why when you poured it foamed. If wine had the same gluten proteins that we have in a beer, the head that forms on a beer, it's from all these proteins and things that are in the beer.
Okay.
And so the bubbles don't escape. They create
They
this
grab
froth.
onto these proteins.
But you see here, we don't have a big head of foam on there.
Right.
If you tried to take a beer and push it to champagne levels and then try to pour it, it would just come out as a froth,
All foam.
pure froth. Then slowly the liquid would separate out, I guess.
So the another distinction would be important to talk about is the difference between a Charmat tank and what we have, because we do not have a Charmat
Right.
tank.
We have a bright tank, which is typical in a brewery.
Mm-hmm.
Is that BRIGHT or BRITE?
BRITE.
And
And the bright tank are rated to 15 psi or 1 bar. They're pressure tested to 2 bars. And it's quite common for people to push it a little over the nominal rated. But a Charmat tank is rated to 5 bars.
that's why a Charmat tank costs 5 times
Right.
the amount,
Of a bright
because
tank.
it needs to be highly regulated, because it's essentially a bomb.
Well, the regular bright tank's a bomb too, but it's
Much
it's
more,
of a
much
bomb.
less deadly of a bomb.
Well, yeah, it's amazing when you work with pressure and you don't realize it, and then you go and you open up a valve by mistake that's under pressure. just stuff flies everywhere. And you're like, oh, that wasn't right. But yes, if you have those high pressures, it's really, really a challenge.
Why the primary reason we got a bright tank instead of a Charlotte tank here at the winery is because it would have cost $100,000 for a small, very small Charlotte tank.
So we use that bright tank that's for the Winnie Rosé that we already tried and the sparkling crabapple and all of our hard ciders.
Correct. And it's perfect for the hard cider. You know, it creates a nice level bubble. And it's okay, I think, for these sparkling wines. They're a nice, light, bubbly coming out. But they would benefit from a higher pressure, more sparkle, more bubbles to it.
I'm interested. I think, let's taste. It might be because the can has been open a bit longer, but I think there's more bubble in the bottle than the can. And I don't know if it's something about the canning process, if it loses some, or if it was because this was open a little bit already a little longer than that.
When we were talking just now about temperature and pressure and how much CO2 is dissolved in the liquid, there's a special device that I don't have yet that enables me to measure the amount of volume. So my reproducibility of how much pressure is got some error bars to it.
So it might be
So I
your pressure,
agree with
not
you.
necessarily can versus bottle, just batch versus batch more so.
It's batch versus batch, and I agree with you. This
quite a bit more
crab apple, I'm
bubble
really
in this.
pleased, has got more tingle to it than the can,
By the way,
which is nice.
What is this?
It's the mixed up nut butter, I believe from Vermont, that we
Pretty
were
good.
so
When you
excited
have
about
on
it
that
when
bread,
we
did you have
tried
a
it
piece on the bread?
Yes.
That's really
at that food show over in Portland.
Yes, I remember
I'm
now.
so excited about it, but we've had trouble trying to figure out what it goes with. But I think you just found something
Oh my God, this
just with the bread.
is a new bread we have, right?
Oh no, that's just peasant bread.
Oh, okay. We had a honey.
It would go very well with the honey wheat.
Yeah, but it went really good.
It goes
with
really
this.
good on the bread.
And I actually like it. I like it with the walnut. You didn't like it with the walnut. I thought that was really good.
Yeah.
And did you like it with the wine when you were having the bread? Or did you not?
Didn't even
pay much
notice.
attention?
I was so into the bread with the peanut butter. I'm sorry. It's peanut butter. I love
Quite all right.
peanut
I
butter.
like honesty. That's good.
We did make
But
a
there's
very
nothing
yummy
stopping
grilled
me from
cheese.
doing it again.
No, there isn't.
And
You
chicken,
go. You
let's
go.
go.
Man, you go. This is education here.
Question from Matt. He's asking: is bar synonymous with atmospheres?
What's that?
Bar synonymous with atmospheres. Isn't it? Atmospheric pressure measured in bars?
Well,
Millibars or?
it's just different. It's just different units. It's like feet and meters.
Okay.
But
they're measuring the same thing.
PSIs. And
But what is a barometric pressure meeting? Isn't it millibars?
I think that's in levels of mercury that rises in a tube. That's how they measure the atmospheric pressure.
That's how they measure it, but is the,
And then they report it in, like, I forget what it's called. What they
Millibars.
It's in millibars?
that's what I remember hearing.
Well, if it's in millibars, then it's the same unit.
We'll have to
Bars,
Google this.
bars, millibars.
I think it is,
It could well be. Yeah.
but
I don't know. Not an atmospheric scientist.
Yeah. Matt, will you look that
We
up
can
for
look-
us
we
on
can-
Google
we
and
can
let
figure
us
that
know?
out for sure.
Report to the rest of the group? And
So sometimes we talk about
crabapple and-
bars and we talk about PSI, and it's 15 PSI is 1 bar.
15?
This one's pretty good, right? With that?
Is it
Goes really
15
nicely.
psi is 1 bar?
15 PSI is 1 bar. 14.98 or something.
So you can imagine you'd want the atmospheric pressure to be in millibars, not in bars,
Yes, it's in millibars.
because
Otherwise,
we'd be very
squashed.
small.
Yeah, we'd be tiny.
So what are we drinking now?
This is the sparkling crab apple.
This is so delicious.
This is sparkling crab apple.
Mm.
This is Dolga.
I haven't
You
had
know-
this for a bit.
I have to say,
And I like this batch. This is the 20 vintage.
maybe it's the batch question, because
It is batch.
I
because
find the cans and the
Dogo?
bottle
the can?
different.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. I know Chuck's enamored with it, but this is to me, a
is-
better batch.
I think so too. It's,
I think
it's
this is-
really, and it might have something, there's a little more sparkle. I think that's true. There's a little more bubble.
This was a very.
my birthday.
You go, man. I know you just walk home. This vintage, 2020, we had a very small amount of crab apples, and
A little bit. I'm saving myself for that next bottle.
and the entire batch of crab apple wine went into sparkling. That's how little we had of it.
Oh yeah, I got so confused when we did the switch
'Cause we got
not
very
long ago.
confused, so we
We
had-
skipped 2020 heirloom crab apple. There's 2020 sparkling heirloom crab apple,
That's all
but we
there
went
is.
straight from
That's all
2019
there
to
is. And in
2021.
2021, there's only still crab apple and no sparkling.
Because we made an abundance of sparkling.
2019, we had way too.
What's going to happen this year? It's
I
another
don't
off
know.
year.
I think it's a little iffy.
Have you heard anything from Scott Roth at Stone Mountain?
Nope, not yet. Chuck usually reaches out and talks to all the people.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I don't know. I don't like the sound of iffy. I want more of the crab apple
Well,
cider.
you know that crab
I
apples
want the
are
crab apple cider.
That
crab
was so
apples are
good.
cyclical, so they
Have a good year, bad year,
Yeah.
and there. I
Yeah.
know that there's plenty that can go wrong. An early frost
My
or
apple
things like
trees are
that.
terrible at home. I have very few. There's
This is-
also a lot of fire blight
Mm.
that's affected orchards around here.
So
But
we've had crab apple. You've had rosé. Anything else we want to talk about the history?
Let's. Well,
We
how
talked about
about
the
what
different
about
methods.
we talked about the different methods. What about the bottles? We talked a bit about the glass pressure being important, but what about the different caps? So Matt already mentioned that there's a winery in New Hampshire. Let's see if I can find this comment. Where is it? Isn't that far? Oh yeah, winery in New Hampshire making pet nats in wicked thick bottles with steel caps.
That's what we're doing.
Oh, that's just these twist offs.
a
So
lot
we
of-
had.
a lot of pet nats we've done with a crown cap,
Oh, yes.
which is similar on a beer bottle. So it's crimped.
That
It's
might
got
be
that
what they're
little
doing.
serrated
yep,
sort of
yep,
edge
yep,
to it.
Yep.
So a lot of pet nats are done with a crown cap.
And then before these, we had those plastic,
So those are the
ones.
same as this, only a
but plastic.
plastic variation.
But those were awful to get off. We only could do it because we had that cool little.
The challenge
hopper thing.
with those, you're exactly right, was that we couldn't get enough pressure into the liquid with our little bright tank to act as a pressure to help push that plastic out.
Oh yeah.
When we first got our tank, we were ill-advised by the people that we got it from, and we ended up bottling
Oh,
it
that
back.
was a
I've heard-
disaster.
I remember
Cork.
this story.
And corks need a champagne cork, which is a big fat thing that gets crunched way down and jammed into the bottle so that
Yep.
it can hold back all the pressure. And in addition, it's wired in. It needs that pressure to be able to pull it out. When we go to open this one, because this was done under 5 bars in a Charmat tank, it will come out like it should and pop. But we put the first ones in.
Oh,
did
that was a
32
disaster.
cases of kiwi, sparkling kiwi wine into these bottles with this cork, with the pressure of this, and you couldn't get them out. I mean, we
No matter what we did.
use
Pliers,
pliers,
plumbing
everything,
tools,
everything.
every
Couldn't get them out.
imaginable tool that we could come up with because we couldn't sell them.
You couldn't open them
Because you couldn't open them.
You couldn't open them.
So we then were left with this task of how do we figure out what do we do? We have 32 cases of product that we can't physically get open.
I still have nightmares of that day.
So-
I can remember it exactly.
The final solution, which was a disaster, we had to take each bottle and take a drill. We bought a new drill, nice and clean drill, drilled through the center of the cork without hitting the glass, so that you took the pressure off, and then you'd screw a corkscrew into the hole that you drilled, and corkscrew it out.
And then
Each
you had to
time,
take the
32
liquid.
cases.
Then you had to take the liquid,
Which had
put it
cork,
back into a tank,
which had cork bits and pieces
had
in
to
it.
refilter it to get all the cork stuff out.
Yep.
And then we talking to the people that, oh no, you can't put cork in that bottle. You don't have enough pressure.
Now you tell us.
Well, they actually told us they sold us a bottle that was designed for the plastic. The plastic is a smaller neck than the cork.
Right.
So the smaller neck made that cork even more under pressure, but they were still misinforming us because that plastic cover was still intended for higher bars. It still did not want to come out.
Right.
And we've had poor folks buy our wine for years, calling us from their dinner parties saying, help, I'm trying to open your wine. I can't get it open. My husband's got all his tools out. We can't do it. And it was very unfortunate, but we learned a big lesson, and we've corrected that lesson. So we switched then to this tap type.
Right, which is a pressure-rated screw cap
For lower pressure.
for low pressure.
Not for champagne pressure.
Can't handle this.
Yeah.
And it can't handle what a pet nat has. That's why pet nat's done under a crown cap. Crown cap
Yeah.
can handle that higher pressure.
What do,
anyway.
what do you think about pet nats? You were talking about it earlier. I have this feeling that pet nats. I have yet to find a pet nat I love. I've had some decent pet nats, but I have yet to find a pet
I've
nat.
had a couple that I like, but
You didn't say love.
I don't love them.
Well, there's something about it. I don't know what it is. I feel like pet nats are a flash in the
But
pan.
I'm hit or miss on champagne too. Right. Champagne to me
I'm not,
is
and
like
I haven't
is
found
like
a pet nat I
it's
love.
like Pinot Noir. So it's like when it's rare for me to have a Pinot Noir that I like. It's just one of these grapes that's always done
Excuse
in
me,
a way that's
it's rare
just-
for you to have a Burgundy that you like?
Yes.
Wow. That's the first I've ever heard that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's one of these grapes that when it's done right, it's tremendous. It's fantastic. And champagne, when it's done right, is fantastic. But they cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars
To do them right.
for a bottle. To grow them right, to do them right. And all the other stuff is like, to me anyway, it's just not there. So I tend to shy away from that. And
Well, I don't know. I mean, clearly you're in the same camp as me anyway, just
so for the
by
pet nat-
default.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
I see a lot of people experimenting with pet nats, and I just haven't, and also I think I look at it from the marketing perspective.
Yeah.
I struggle with that too. I don't know where it fits from a marketing perspective. Where does it sit? How do you sell that at a supermarket? If you can't fit the market across a broad range with the product, that also is limiting of the product, which is not fair. There are some wonderful
that's the only way we
niche
get change, too.
markets.
Yeah.
Yes.
The new
So
stuff
that's
on the
not entirely fair, but I'm still just looking at it from the broader picture.
Yeah.
Both the quality of the products that we've been able to have and the way in which those products are going to be distributed into the world.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems to me that pet nats are going to be a short-lived.
Can they be
Flash in
all
the
sorts of
pan.
different wines can be done in that style?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So that's stuff too, because there's such a broad range that you could.
And a lot of pet nats,
Yeah.
especially in New England, are being made from fruit wines. So
I did a strawberry pet nat. I did a crabapple pet nat. Did a rosé pet nat. Did a 3 honey pet nat.
and we've never released a pet nat.
None of them quite work.
That's telling, right?
It's just so far anyway. I haven't figured out a way that makes it really pleasing
So-
to me. But maybe it's just because I'm not really into that style.
So the future is to be determined for the pet nat.
Out of here anyway. For
Yeah.
Sure.
Matt
But
has
there's a lot of
certainly.
there's
I
a
don't
lot
think
of
a pet
good.
nat has a future.
I think there
here.
are a lot of good examples out there, and I think we included should just explore them.
Mhm.
Just drink more of
Absolutely.
them. It's
Yeah.
like sour beers or anything that's new and different.
I will never turn one down.
Yeah. Matt says he's definitely found ones that he enjoys. They have this rich, almost yeasty back flavor. They take more attention to serve than many folks would want to exert.
And not almost yeasty.
Very.
Yeasty. Well, no, I mean, he's talking about yeasty back flavor because
Some
yeast,
can be.
some
yeah,
of the
more than
yeast
others.
is actually, typically when you ferment a champagne in method champenois, you actually disgorge the yeast. You get the yeast out.
They do that with pet naps now.
I haven't seen that.
So Bill had one he shared with me.
They disgorged
They
it?
go through the same disgorging.
Interesting. So I
Well,
think we've got about 15 minutes left, so we should.
I know that's what you want.
I may or may not have had a particular motive for suggesting this theme this week.
You think it's time
I'm really excited.
to
for this.
reveal
It's a good
the
time.
big surprise? I think our audience here, given who's on with us today, all knows about it already.
They do. How would that happen?
Oh, I don't know.
We may or may not
is
have
our
been.
marketing department like leaking concepts
I
out?
mean, we've alluded to it here. haven't
You're
we?
not even showing the new label, are you?
No. We have to
No.
keep some surprise.
I haven't even seen this.
You haven't seen it yet?
No, I've
Oh, wait till you
heard.
see this.
I've heard.
We have to
You're
keep
gonna love it. It's-
some level of surprise.
I mean, it's Deb, right? So she did the rosé can with the fish.
Mm-hmm.
She did the hermit tumbling into the cranberry bog for the cider. She's done the classic firewood and kittens. So she's doing the label for this.
So before I pop this wonderful cork, tell us what I'm about to do. What is this?
I don't know what you're about to do.
Tell us what this is.
About that?
Yeah, what is this? What is the big surprise?
So this is another rosé like wine from Hermit Woods. It's not made out of grapes.
Mhm.
That has become one of our most favorite
What did I break
wines
up there?
to drink. Are you thinking of?
He's
launching
looking at
it?
the launch zone.
I know you love doing that, don't you?
You're not
So yeah, I
actually
mean,
supposed to do
we have 3 rosés on our list, and
Yes.
we currently carbonate 2 of them.
2 of them, exactly.
that.
So this is the 3rd rosé, the very, very popular rosé that we have. It's made out of classic New England goodies, strawberries, rhubarb, and blueberries, all blended together, and very aromatic, very fun, fruity, easy drinking sort of wine, extremely popular. I've now paired up with a local farm that can supply us with more strawberries. And they're the best strawberries I've ever had. And so this year, for the first time, that's not what's in this bottle, but for the first time, I have twice as much strawberry
Oh,
rhubarb
well,
that I've
when
made
this
in the
gets into the world, you're going to need it.
past. So this
As it is, we usually run out of strawberry rhubarb by the fall,
Right.
so twice as much would be good anyway. But now it's
So this is now, we took some strawberry rhubarb wine, and this particular batch actually was made from some organic strawberries from Oregon. These were shipped cross country in the winter in an attempt to expand our production. And
Because so many of you want our strawberry rhubarb. You can't
it's
keep
been
up.
a challenge. It's been a challenge, but working now with the farm here in New Hampshire is really great. And so the new batch is twice as large. Some of it will go into more of this, I'm sure, because this will go pretty quickly, I think. And anyway, this, instead of going through our little bright tank to get some nice tingly bubbles and a pressure rated screw cap on it, was put into a tank, finished off, and sent to Flag Hill.
Thank you, Flag Hill.
Flag Hill Winery. And Brian there has done fantastic things with the winery. And one of the things he did years ago, and maybe it was done before by his predecessor, but anyway, they have a Charmant tank at Flag Hill.
No, Brian got it.
Brian did get it.
Yeah,
Okay.
it says-
So Brian invested in a high pressure tank so that he could produce proper levels of carbonation into the sparkling wines. He's very dedicated to cold hardy hybrids, especially the white wine grapes. He recognizes our environment. It's a cool environment. It does better for higher acid wines, and higher acid wines, like those in Champagne, do best with bubbles. So he put that all together, as you rightfully should. And so he invested in this, and he produces a lot of sparkling wines. He also is an entrepreneur and recognized that other small craft wineries in New England could really benefit from having the opportunity to have some of their wines
And
put
he
into a high
had to
carbonation.
figure out how to pay for that Charmant tank.
Right, right. And it's still very reasonable for the
Yeah,
process.
yeah.
So it's great. Apollo Vineyards gets some of their wines done by
Mm-hmm.
Brian at Flag Hill, and we've just started. I plan to do the rosé and the crabapple in this format.
So this is a first in 2 levels. This is the first time we've sparkled strawberry rhubarb, and it's the first time we've actually offered a champagne quality product. Can't use the word champagne because it's got to be in Champagne. Oh, we should add this little piece.
That's a good point.
that's a
to
good
make.
history bit.
And I've actually learned more about this history. I did some more research. So I used to say that there's only one winery in the United States that still uses the term champagne.
And they're allowed to because they're grandfathered in.
Right, and that's Corbel. But it's actually a little bit, there's some inaccuracies to that. So technically, grandfathered in is sort of an excuse for us to continue doing something that we really shouldn't be doing. The French don't agree with the grandfathered in idea. The French wanted to cut a deal with the States that eliminated us from using that term, but not everybody wanted to play ball. So there was wiggle room, including Corbel, who's been doing it for a long time. So they left wiggle room in the States. The French aren't happy about it. The French would not like for Corbel to continue using it as champagne, but our government has not decided to crack down on that. We gave a big, one up to the French by agreeing to stop using champagne going forward, but we wouldn't agree to kill it across the board. So I think there's actually, Corbel is one. I think there's potentially a couple others in the States that might still use it inappropriately, against the rules technically, but nobody in the U.S. is enforcing that.
So now when you go and you buy a champagne style wine, yes, Marika.
Marika's thirsty.
We've only got 8 minutes.
We got plenty of time. 8 minutes. We could drink this in 8 minutes.
She's thirsty, Bob. She's thirsty.
Here,
She
let's
wants
see.
this.
How hard is it to get the cork
Well,
out?
I don't know. You'll have to see.
Oh no, that's great.
Oh, it's coming.
Watch your lights.
Watch my
That's
lights. Here we go. You saw it here first.
Jesus.
Now, mind you,
I'm glad there was. Oh,
there's a dent in the ceiling.
Dent in the ceiling.
that's good. So you should never do that, by the way. You should never do that for 2 reasons. Safety reasons,
Yes.
you should never do that because you could put an eye out, as they say in the Christmas story.
Right.
And the other reason is you release a surge of bubbles when you do that. And when you open any fine champagnes, the best way to do it is to
Shake
release
it up.
it. No.
And
To
spray it.
release it very slowly. So you just let
If
that
it's just little-
compression out very slowly. That is the best way to open a champagne.
But the pop is so
The
least
pop
amount of
is
fun.
so much fun, and we're celebrating today. So there it is.
It's your birthday. You get to do it.
It's my birthday.
Because that is
Yeah.
the one. That's one thing that's about the screw caps is you do
Oh,
lose.
look at all those. Look at that.
Look at all those bubbles. Tiny bubbles.
Ah, here, switch cameras, Marika. I'll pour one, not over the keyboard, but close.
There you go. Because you lose some of the satisfaction when you just do a screw cap, especially on something celebratory like this.
Oh yeah, this is
So the mouthfeel with this is completely different than the others.
completely different.
There's so much more
Oh.
texture that's created with this amount of CO2 level to the wine.
And you see how when you pour it, it bubbles, which is why you have to bottle it under pressure.
Right.
Because it just
Absolutely.
wants
It
to
never would-
explode.
Yeah. It would never otherwise. do
And so
that.
here's another important thing. People are so, even myself, like I want to swirl, right? That's what you do
Don't
when you pour
swirl.
wine.
Yeah,
You
you
don't
don't
swirl
swirl.
sparkling.
Excellent. Thank
Right.
you for bringing that up.
Every swirl will lose you some of the bubbles. So
You know what's interesting too? Actual glass styles for champagnes have changed drastically in the last 50 years. They used to be these big, wide,
almost like a what do you call
like
it?
a martini type of thing. You know,
yeah,
like
no,
this little bowl.
There's a name for it. I don't remember the name.
it's a particular type of cocktail glass. There's
Yes.
it's not a martini glass. I don't remember,
It's
but
not. It's that
that rounder,
wide,
yeah. But that
shallow
doesn't.
fishbowl thing.
That's bad for.
With all the
bubbles.
bubbles out right away. And so people realized that having a flute was much better at preserving the bubbles and
displaying the
directing
bubbles.
everything into your nose and down your throat.
Well, you'd be interested to know that there is a fairly significant debate about that.
I bet there is, Bob.
There is. There are those advocates for bringing back
The big
the
flap.
broad.
It's a
Yes.
pretty type of glass, but it doesn't display the bubbles as well, I feel like.
But there are, and I forget the argument when I was reading about it, but I believe it has something to do with wanting to disperse some of those bubbles before you drink it. So I don't know, but it's worth. I'm gonna dig back into that because it is interesting. There is a debate now as to whether this is actually it looks fancier, and there's some some marketing reasons that this works.
So did avocado shag carpet. You know,
Right.
All marketing.
things come and go.
Things change.
Well, it's interesting, like with beer, people craft a beer and they carbonate a beer, but then when you pour your beer, you're supposed to pour it down into the glass and let it foam, not slip it down the sides.
Right,
Oh,
exactly.
Otherwise, you get too much CO2 bite.
And then that
Or the
CO2 ends up in
character.
your stomach and you get indigestion.
Yeah. So there's different formats designed
Yeah.
for the liquid. You know,
So-
this is interesting. I had this for the first time right immediately after it came from Flag Hill. It was a Thursday night, last Thursday night. And the wine was rough. And I was a little underimpressed by the whole process. So 5 days later,
Bottle
this-
shock.
it's bottle shock. So 5 days later, this wine now is much
I think
softer
it
and
tastes-
much
it-
more together.
The actual
than it was
flavor
before.
is quite different to me than what's currently in strawberry rhubarb bottles, and I
this particular
love it.
batch is different.
It tastes. I
than
taste the
others.
rhubarb much more. I think with current strawberry rhubarb, I think the rhubarb mostly just serves to kind of add that little bit of tartness. It kind of dries it out at the end. But this, to me, actually, I taste rhubarb, and I think it's incredible.
I get the rhubarb too a lot, and it's
It's still got that strawberry
it was a different
sweetness.
batch of strawberries than I'm used to working with. All of the stems had been removed, so that added a different format to work with. And then I've been experimenting with different ways of extracting more out of the fruit with different enzymes, and so this was a whole experimental. This went through the SOX
Oh, yes.
filter
Yep.
process, and so this is an experimental batch in so many ways. But I'm
There's so many
really
ways.
happy by what's happened to it in the last 5 days.
So Janice came through on. It's a coupe glass. That's what it's called.
Coupe?
Coupe. Yeah.
How do you spell that?
A coupe. COUPE. I think.
Coupe, C-O-U-P,
Yeah.
like a car.
Yep. And then Matt asked if this would technically be a brut
A brew?
champagne, right?
Well,
No,
brut is
references,
different sugar levels.
brut is referencing dry.
Okay.
And extra brut.
There's brut, there's extra brut.
Extra brut.
There's
Yeah.
all these things. And
That's
it's,
just dry.
So extra dry champagne is not as dry as brut.
I know.
It's very confusing.
Yeah, it is quite confusing.
And then everybody wants to know when will this
When?
be available?
Yes.
When?
That's for Bob to answer.
When?
We are working feverishly to get our labels designed and approved by the federal government. And until they're designed and improved, they're being improved now as they're being designed.
There's 120 cases of this
And-
sitting in our warehouse.
Yes. So
Without
you're
labels,
putting all this
without
on me. That's what you're doing.
Well,
This is all me.
You know, just
The
no.
marketing department has to
Well,
decide when this gets released. Well, that's what's going to happen. We have a designer working. We have a wonderful label. I'm so excited about it.
I
Then we got to get the
am.
government to approve that label. That can take anywhere from a few days to a few months. And once the government approves the label, we then need to send it off to the printer, which typically takes 1 to 2 weeks to turn those around.
2 weeks.
And then we need to get them on the bottle. So it will be, unfortunately, sorry folks, not till later this fall. I'm hopeful for end of October. Before we get to the, I'd like this to release for the holiday season. This is going to be the holiday wine to
Oh,
beat
that would
all
really be
holiday
good.
wine.
I wonder if it's, it'd be tough to get it in time for the fall release for the club members.
Yeah.
There's no way.
Yeah,
There's no way.
because that's early to mid October. Yeah.
There's no way.
But for the holidays.
For the holidays,
at
this is a
least.
holiday wine. So look forward to strawberry rhubarb, sparkling strawberry rhubarb
it's
for the
so-
holidays.
it's so
It's
good.
so good. And
It's
guess
so
what?
good.
The good news is that we're going to be working with, we're so happy with this process and that the job that Flag Hill, Brian down there did for us, that over the next couple of years, we're going to be transitioning all of our
So we
sparkling.
can shoot corks at the ceiling.
We can
all
shoot
the
corks
time.
at the ceiling all the time. So our sparkling crabapple and our rosé are going to be done in the Charlotte method going forward, and
Yeah.
it's really going to be a nice addition. So everybody will be very pleased, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, everyone's very
I
excited.
really want to do a 3 honey.
Oh, yes. Oh, I told you I have had the
We
only
need to have-
sparkling
we need to have
3
a
honey.
3 honey done. That's
You do need to have that done. Absolutely.
good. Good.
Even
With
if
the
you have to give up
bubbles-
3 honey altogether just to make that.
I almost think that
Trust me,
too much
Jerry, we'll
bubble.
just on board with
clarify that with your wife.
She will be on board with that.
Okay.
And I
I
just
would
wanted
think
to
that too
say,
much bubble would make it
no,
the flavor go away, because that's
No.
what I find with especially the crab apple. Straight crab apple to me is so much more potent in its tartness and flavor, and then the bubbles kind of lighten it up.
It does
It
change
doesn't
it.
take
You're right.
away
That's a
from
good
flavor,
point.
but it does kind of. There isn't as
personally-
much, and 3 honey is already so light.
Gerald and he made a method champenois 3 honey many years ago. I still have some. There's still maybe a sparkling one laying down in that
I'll
cellar.
put on a face shield and go down and, no, we don't need that.
You don't.
just
It's
the
not that.
opposite.
No, but there's still maybe one. There's I think a dozen bottles down there. That and
That was-
if,
that's true. That was
if I open one and it sparkles, I'm going to call you up and we'll have
I
to
know you called me
drive
that,
over.
Yeah, I didn't drive over.
But Geraldine was already a fan. I don't need to sell her on that. And before we close, I just need you to know this peanut butter goes really good with the strawberry
Did you
rhubarb.
leave it even? Have to lick it clean.
Great.
All right. On that note,
Oh yeah. Cheers
Well,
to
think
that.
about it. Think about a good peanut butter and strawberry jelly.
and strawberries, yes, absolutely.
Strawberries. So you're smelling strawberries and
So you've wasted another Monday night hanging out with the hermits at the winery. Thank you, folks. It was a pleasure as always. And we look forward to seeing you next Monday for a
Indeed.
surprise.
For something.
Something
For
that we will
something.
talk
yeah,
about.
we don't know what we're doing next.
No,
do we?
we got to get better at that. It's
we're
hard.
on it.
We tried.
In the
Sometimes
summer, it's
we
so
would get
hard. We're
ahead a
so
little
busy.
bit,
But this winter, we're going to get ahead.
Yeah.
All right.
We're ahead. So thank you,
We'll
everybody.
see what happens.
We will see you.
They'll keep us honest on that.
Yes, they will. See you either in person or online next Monday at 5:30, YouTube or Facebook.
Cheers,
Thank you.
everyone.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.